I thank you, Honourable Presiding Member, and I'm happy to follow the Honourable State Minister. In the Northeast, Honourable Presiding Member, we have over 60,000 women-headed households. As you know, the Northeast has been a war zone. There has been immense amount of destruction of property, houses, because of the nature in which the government waged the war. As a result, after the war finished, housing became a major crisis, the lack of housing. People had land, they had deeded property, however, they didn't have a house to live in. Now, we had the Indian housing scheme that to a great extent helped in alleviating that crisis. And then, of course, there were several government schemes that were introduced. Unfortunately, those government schemes were based on providing funds for the building of houses which are grossly inadequate. And it was done in a way, Honourable Presiding Member, where the funds were released in stages. So what happens is, for the first stage, a certain amount of sum is released. You are supposed to construct to a certain limit, and it's only after that that the second sachet of funds will get released. But if the amount of money that was released in the first instance is inadequate, and more often than not it has been grossly inadequate, then obviously to proceed with that housing project, people struggle. And what has happened over time, especially in the case of these women-headed households, is that they are forced to take a loan. They are forced to take a loan in order to complete that first stage, in order to get the second stage of funds to be released from the government, and they get into a rut. They get into a vicious debt cycle. Many members here have already spoken about microfinance. When the war was complete, when the war ended, soon after the war, it was these finance companies that ran to the Northeast because they realized the situation. As a result of the poverty that existed, for those victims to move forward, they lavishly gave these funding, which actually got them into a debt trap, and people committed suicide. People started committing suicide. So under these circumstances, Honourable Presiding Member, I mean, the houses got destroyed not because of some natural disaster, or not because they didn't have houses. They had houses, and they were destroyed due to military action. So at the very least, actually they should have been compensated for the nature of bombings that took place. They should have been compensated so that they could have built the house. And then these housing schemes ideally should have been for people who had property but who did not have a house. You see, not whose houses had been destroyed. That should have been actually tackled completely separately. But unfortunately, no government since the end of the war chose to look at it that way. And I urge the honourable lady to intervene on behalf of these women-headed households, because they are extremely vulnerable, to somehow try and convince the relevant ministries to look at this debt trap issue with regards to these housing schemes in particular. Then with regards to children, the education system, Honourable Presiding Member, very unfortunately, in this country is not, if I may say so, geared towards the country's development, production and economic developmental needs. I mean, there is a fair criticism that, we formulate our education policies on the basis of trying to get aid from the World Bank, from the Asian Development Bank. And eventually it is a criticism where we ultimately bring out, produce people who have qualifications as opposed to the skills that actually are relevant for this country. I think even members opposite, even in the government side, have on several occasions agreed with the sentiment that our education system has to be completely overhauled. I mean, we need to produce genuine entrepreneurship and people with an investment mind, none of which unfortunately happens. It is only an elite few who can have access to private institutions and foreign institutions who eventually succeed very well in this country. So it's not that we don't have the talent. It just means that we are not providing the system with the sort of adequate capacity to produce those sort of qualified people. Secondly, Honorable Presiding Member, now our schooling structure has cadres for counselling. Now if you take the Northeast, this counselling is a crucial part.
Honorable Member, you have another 2 minutes.
Sorry?
You have another 2 more minutes.
Yeah. Counselling is a crucial part because we have a drug problem and it's rampant. And if I may say with the utmost responsibility, the military is involved in it. We have still not got out of this counterinsurgency mentality where the military also peddles drugs in the Northeast. I mean, it can't happen without the three forces knowing, without them not knowing. That is the sort of pervasive presence of the military in the Northeast. It is happening through them. It's part of this counterinsurgency. And as a result, we have a very, very high rate of children becoming dependent on drugs and alcohol. And counseling is crucial. Now, unfortunately, in our system, this counseling that we have in schools, these counselors are not trained. They just fill the cadre. There is no specific program for them to be trained and to be able to handle, particularly in the Northeast, the sort of grave situation that exists. And, as a result, what happens is you have problems like suicide attempts, social pressures, addiction problems that are not going away. And the system, because these counselors are not trained in the proper way, the system condemns those people further and further. They are not counseled to a point where they come out of it and help to come out of it. Instead, they are condemned to a point where they can't go back to school. So they fall between the stools. And this is a massive problem in the Northeast. And as a result, what happens is you have the whole system outcasts these young people, and they then become desperate. Then
please wind up this speech, Honorable
crime
Member.
increases,
your time's here.
and it just snowballs over and over. I will conclude with that, Honorable Presiding Member, and I ask once again, I have stated that it is a war zone. We have not recovered from the losses in the war financially, and on top of that, we have such a massive rate of 60,000 and more women-headed households. It's a very vulnerable part of the country, and I appeal to the Honourable Lady to use whatever influences that she has with the government to intervene so that this grave situation is addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
நம்ம லங்கா ஃபோர் சேனலை லைக் பண்ணுங்க, ஷேர் பண்ணுங்க, சப்ஸ்கிரைப் பண்ணுங்க, and மறக்காம உங்க கருத்துக்களை கீழே கமெண்ட் பண்ணுங்க.